Hello and welcome to Saints Live, the final whistle. I'm Steve Forbes.
And I'm Kenzie Benali.
Well, it wasn't the end to the season that we were hoping for as Southampton succumbed to a 4-1 defeat away at Leicester. And now rejoining us to discuss the game, we have Dean Hammond and Adam Leach. Adam, what did you make of the match?
Oh, disappointing, Steve. Honestly, I was hopeful we were going to finish with something positive to take into the summer, but unfortunately, I wouldn't say more of the same. That's a little bit unfair, probably, even though the scoreline was one-sided in the end. The first half felt a little bit flat in general, but for both teams, I think. But I think Leicester really came out the start of the second half determined to try and get the win, and Saints unfortunately just didn't really react well enough to the amount of intensity and pressure that Leicester were able to exert on them. And in the end, unfortunately, it was all too easy for Leicester, and they were cutting through at will, really. And it's pretty difficult to remember more than one or two opportunities that Saints managed to create during the entire match. And I would argue that even at least one of those was a half chance rather than a really good chance. So really disappointing day, definitely. 15th, 40 points. It doesn't feel great right now. And I'm pretty sure that's the same for Ralph and the players as well. We've got to take this into the summer, and not just this, but this caps off a pretty horrendous run that they've had into the end of the season. So yeah, just a disappointing way to finish. I think we just all wanted a bit more positivity.
Do you agree with that, Dean, that Southampton just couldn't get out of first or second gear today?
I'd have to echo Adam's thoughts, really, Steve. I think he used the right word, just disappointment, really. I think going into the summer, you want to try and finish the season strong with at least the performance. Something like we've mentioned it many times this year, you can't control a result. But yeah, I think just disappointment. Just there seemed to be a lack of belief, I think, attacking wise for Southampton, whether that's within the players, whether to take that risk. When they did get into certain areas, players were taking an extra touch to try to make sure the ball was in the right position, weren't playing instinctively. And I don't think, in fairness, I don't think it was a 4-1. I don't think Leicester were brilliant, but they deserved to win. They were more clinical when they had opportunities. And like Adam said, you can't really look at Southampton and say we created chances. Cassius Michael's not really had many saves to make, maybe from Nathan Redmond with the header, but they were few and far between, really. And again, I think it just comes down to those individual mistakes that have cost Southampton over the last probably 12 games of the season, which is kind of going to reflect on how we judge the season, unfortunately, because I think this season they've flirted with brilliance. There's been some performances that we've all loved and been really excited by. They almost teased us, and we try not to get too carried away on this show, but we do at times because I think going into March we were in a great position in quarterfinal of the FA Cup, flying high in the league, and kind of discussing where this team could go really with their development, because we were all really confident. It's kind of just faded out, and I think that probably summed up the performance today, which is unfortunate. Like I always say, you can never question the players' effort. I don't think you can ever do that, which is a positive and a plus. But I think they just, again, lacked a little bit of belief and imagination today, which sits with you as a player over the summer. I'm not going to lie, will sit with you, and hopefully the players can go away and reflect and come back raring to go for next season. And it'll be interesting to see what happens in the summer.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Adam, let's kind of go into the specifics of the match then. There were first half goals in every Premier League game except ours. There was a Vardy penalty appeal, though. What did you make of that and the first 45 as a whole?
Were there other Premier League games today? Somebody should let me know what happened. It was not the first half of dreams, was it? It was just very end of season feel to it, to be honest. In that first half, it was kind of like two teams who didn't feel like they had a lot to play for, struggling to really commit themselves one last time, I think. The penalty appeal itself, I didn't think it was a penalty. I think it was the right decision. I think that Vardy's kind of on his way down as the tackle is sort of about to be made, and then pulls out the tackle, and Vardy's kind of going down anyway, I think. So I felt like that was actually the right decision on that one. But probably, to be fair, 0-0 was, Leicester were probably slightly the better team in the first half, but only slightly, and they probably didn't deserve to lead. So actually 0-0 at half time was I think was probably fair. But you could see from that first half that you just had that sense if either team could just up their game a little bit, just bring a bit more intensity, and as Dean said, actually quite correctly, a bit more of a clinical touch in and around the final third, especially in the build-up play, that there was 3 points there for the taking. It was just probably a case of who was actually going to be able to do that if either team. Unfortunately, in the end, it was obviously Leicester.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, we didn't also have to wait long for a goal in the second half either, Dean, and it came through a defensive error from Lianco.
Yeah, it did, and unfortunate for Lianco because I thought he actually marshalled Jamie Vardy pretty well today, especially in the first half. He reacted really well, to be fair to him, after the goal as well. He had a one-on-one situation with Harvey Barnes where he defended that very, very well. A last-ditch tackle against Jamie Vardy when he's going across the box and he was almost going to score. But with the goal, the first goal in these sort of games is really, really important when the game is really, really tight and there's not much in it. And didn't deal with the first header. I think whether he lose sight of it, lack of concentration, whether he thinks he's going to get a free header because it's the ball just come back in play and Jamie Vardy's not really pressing him. And then the second header, you just see as he goes to attempt to head it back to McCarthy, I think his right leg kind of loses balance and he heads it and gets no power in it. And with Jamie Vardy closing you down like that, he's sharp and he anticipates it. So he's just been aware of the situation. At 0-0, maybe try not to be too clever. Just deal with the situation, get the ball away from the box. And it's an individual area where I think if that goal doesn't go in, maybe it's difficult for Leicester to break Southampton today, and it probably ends up at a closer game, maybe even a 0-0, because there wasn't many opportunities in the game. It was pretty much a stalemate. So unfortunate, because they're so easy to eradicate those sort of things. And he'll be frustrated with himself because, like I say, I think he put on a pretty decent performance today in the way he marshalled Jamie Vardy and the way he defended. So I'm sure he'll have some personal frustrations.
Well, a bit of controversy around that goal. I mean, the Saints clearly unhappy with the fact the ball wasn't given back to them. Adam, what did you make of all of that?
Yeah, I mean, there's two thoughts on that, really. One, well, I guess John Moss thought he was going to have a nice, easy retirement match today, which he certainly didn't actually, because it got a little bit feisty at times, despite the fact that kind of there wasn't loads of goalmouth action other than the goals. It actually did get a little bit tasty at times, and I think Saints had it was not a straightforward one, I don't think, but Saints had a right to be annoyed about it. But I think you see this too often, that just because something like that has gone against you, I mean, what's happened there, whether they're right or wrong, in my mind, it's kind of almost irrelevant, because actually Leicester have got the ball midway in their own half. You don't need to concede a goal from just because you didn't get that drop ball, and the way they conceded it was so basic and so simple. That actually, you know what, you've just got to get your head back on it. Okay, maybe he's made a mistake, but you've given Leicester possession after a break in play midway in their own half. You don't need to be conceding a goal 5 seconds later because of that. And I genuinely hope we don't hear too many complaints about that after the game, other than a bit of an observation. If the Saints still strongly disagree with it, having had the benefit of probably a lot more rollback on the replays than we've had, because ultimately you shouldn't be conceding those kind of goals. They're really, really very basic errors. But it's the kind of thing, frankly, you just see so often. The players, you could see as it came back, the 6-7 players complaining to the referee as Kasper Schmeichel sailed the ball over their heads. They're still complaining. You've just got to get your head back on the game. Yes, there's a bad mistake from Lianco, who I agree with Dean. I feel sorry for, because I thought he otherwise played really well. But but Saints in general, you can't be culpable like that, whether it's a mistake or not. You've got to concentrate.
Well, Leicester's second goal through Jamie Vardy came after Southampton had imposed a bit of pressure on their opponents today. Do you want to talk us through that period, Dean?
Yeah, I think Southampton were having a bit more possession, Steve, and getting a bit more territory. Whether it was pressure, I'm not too sure, but they were taking a few more risks. The fullbacks were playing a little bit higher, committing more players forward, and it just left them open to the counter attack. And when Leicester have got players that are quick on that counter attack, in Harvey Barnes, he wins the ball back. He rides one tackle, two tackles between Cole Walker-Peters and Stuart Armstrong, and plays the ball into Jamie Vardy. And you can see that the Southampton was stretched because Jamie Vardy has a really heavy touch, actually, but he gets away and he's one-on-one with Lianco. And it's easy for me to sit here. I've played with Jamie. I've watched Jamie for years. I know he's going to cut back onto his right foot. He's never going to shoot with his left foot, especially when he has that second touch within the box. But you have to say that's, Jamie Vardy at his best. One-on-one situation. He's waiting for Lianco to commit himself, to dive in. As soon as he does that, he checks back. He's got brilliant balance, keeps his feet very well, and then just plays it into the near post. So you can't really complain because it was what Southampton needed to do. They needed to put more pressure on Leicester. They needed to try and create an opportunity. And you only do that by committing more players forward, taking more risks, and you are vulnerable to the counter-attack. So classic Leicester, brilliant on the counter-attack, and a classic Jamie Vardy finish. So no real complaints, really.
Well, the Saints got back into the game from the penalty spot, which gave them a glimmer of hope for all of 2 minutes. What did you make of that period of the game, Adam?
Well, it was nice to have some hope. I enjoyed those couple of minutes. Yeah, I mean, it was a stonewall penalty, and you expect Prowsey now. You kind of just expect him to step up and put it in the back of the net, which he obviously did. And at that point, I guess if it just felt like, okay, maybe there's something here for Saints to do in this game. I think at 2-0, to be honest, I'd kind of written it off. I thought, well, they're probably not coming back from this. But as soon as they've got that goal, you feel like, right, there's really an opportunity for them here. It's just unfortunate that moment didn't last really very long at all. Before the game was really put beyond them. But yeah, it's these moments in games for Saints. I know that the sort of phrase game management is very fashionable at the moment, but it is true for Saints. They do lose themselves in odd moments in the game. Maybe you could say that with that first goal, maybe again in that period when they've got the goal back, that's when they kind of really just need to consolidate and then go again and try and get that equalizer, as well. As unfortunately for them, they kind of don't manage that situation. Perhaps they go too gung-ho, perhaps they're just all out instantly, right, we're just going to throw everything at it, and leave themselves a little bit overexposed, and then you're out of the game again. It's just perhaps being a little bit more smart in those moments. That there's something they need to work on going into next season.
Yeah, well, Leicester's fourth goal added a bit of gloss to the scoreline for the Foxes, but Dean, it didn't really feel like a fair reflection of the game, ending 4-1.
No, I didn't. I don't think it was a 4-1. If you'd looked at the result and you'd not seen the game or any highlights, you would expect a 4-1 result is where Leicester have been really, really dominant. Alex McCarthy's had loads of saves to make. They've had corners, they've had territory, they've had lots of possession. It was pretty even, except for Leicester being really clinical. But it's a good finish, the fourth goal. Perez has come on and scored 2 goals. It's Leicester, they've moved the ball very, very well. The weight of the pass from Tielemans is great, so Ricardo can run onto the ball. It's a good pullback, good positioning from Perez to hold his position, and an excellent finish. But Adam just touched on it there. I think it's good for the players to learn from this, because there has to be a point within games where the game doesn't get away from you too quickly. I think at times Southampton can potentially stay within the game. It gets to 2-1. Can they have 5-10 minutes of just control, calm, compose themselves, and not having to, right, we've got one back, we need to go and get the second straight away. Maybe just see how the game's developing, because there was time at that moment, but that comes from the players. It's a young squad, and you have to learn from these situations and these moments. But I don't think it was a clinical 4-1. I don't think it's a thrashing. But it is a 4-1 result, and Leicester were much more clinical, and Southampton today didn't really create anything.
So a 15th place finish for Southampton then. Adam, what are your views on that?
Trying to choose my words carefully here, because I would say disappointing, but I don't want to be overly critical in the sense that I think they've probably overall underperformed when you look at 40 points this year versus 43 last year. And I think given where they were kind of 2/3 of the way through the season, I think there was a lot more in this season for them than they've managed to extract out of it, finishing in the end 5 points above the relegation zone, was it? It's not really, it doesn't really feel like a reflection on kind of how you feel about the season, bar these last 6-8 weeks and how that's gone. But that's why it feels disappointing. I mean, overall, is that a reflection of the quality of the squad they've got? Is 40 points over a season? Is that right? I would argue if you look at the Premier League squads on paper, they should be better than that. Should they be extraordinarily better than that? Probably not. But I think realistically for this club, for this team, I think the progress into that mid-table like area, I'm not saying they have to have a top 10 finish, but that sort of, you feel like 10, 11, 12, that's very achievable for Southampton. And so to be down in 15th, yeah, it doesn't feel great to the end of this season. I don't think it's overall, I think your generous summary is that they've done averagely because they've not flirted with relegation really. So main job done, but nothing more than that has been achieved really. And I think that's a bit of a shame.
All right, well, Dean, before the game, we did hear Adam's full assessment of Southampton's season so far. Now that all 38 games have been completed, how would you sum up the campaign?
I think it's an opportunity missed. I think that's where the frustration is and maybe the disappointment is, because Southampton got themselves in such a good position going into March, like we've mentioned before. If you look at the season, an FA Cup quarter-final, which is good, a cup run, drawn twice against Man City, a brilliant result away at Tottenham, which I think was one of the performances of the season and comeback of the season. A brilliant result against Arsenal at home, where we saw Southampton play a little bit different, which is good for this squad. There's some development in that, where they held a shape and played on the counter-attack, which we haven't seen much from Southampton. So I think there's some development there. But I think and what Adam's trying to say, the disappointment is you go into March and you think, where could the club go from now? And if you look at the fixtures, I think the disappointment is in the fixtures. I've written it down here. You lose 4-0 to Aston Villa. There's a 2-1 defeat to Newcastle, a 2-1 defeat to Watford, a 1-1 draw with Leeds, a 2-0 defeat to Burnley, a 2-1 defeat to Palace, and a 3-0 defeat to Brentford. Now, I think that there's 7 out of 11, 12 games there where you would expect to do a little bit better, to pick up a few more points. Finished 11 points off 10th. I think out of those fixtures, I think you can almost get the 11 points. And then it looks a completely different season. So on the positive, there's been some brilliant performances. We've been at St Mary's Live, where we've seen the games, and we've been in fantastic mood because there's been some brilliant football, some aggressive pressing, some great goals. We saw from goals of the season earlier before the game in the show, some brilliant goals. But I think the frustration comes there, where it's just an opportunity missed for this team to finish a little bit higher, to finish on a high note. You always feel a little bit lower when the season doesn't finish quite how you want. And I think that's the frustration and the disappointment, because there has been some special moments this season, but just an opportunity missed out where they could have easily finished 12th or 10th, and then it's a completely different picture.
Oh, well, Dean, Adam, it really has been an absolute pleasure to speak with you throughout the season. Thank you so much for your company and your fantastic analysis. We'll miss them, won't we?
Certainly will.
And of course, we will miss the company of you as well. Thank you so much for tuning in with us every week. And of course, that does conclude the 21-22 campaign. It has been quite a roller coaster, but as always, we march on, and we look forward to seeing you right here on the Final Whistle and Saints Live next season. Bye for now.
See you next season.